Got a World War III update for you today. There may even be a special appearance by our favorite leader over there in North Korea. Well, maybe I'll start with North Korea. So, in North Korea, if we were to listen to the North Korean newscasting lady, she would say, "Today is a very glorious day because the sun is shining for victory, and we will do our nuclear test today." And they did another missile test, but apparently it failed. It failed because it was sabotaged by the West. Yeah. So Kim Jong-un is, "Okay, maybe we made it fail on purpose to make you think we didn't have the power. With my pudgy fist, I can hit the button and launch a missile at random. Fear me. Fear me. Hear my voice. Fear me." Yeah, so Kim Jong-un, yeah, he's there doing the same thing. So Japan is like shitting bricks. They're like, "Oh my God, these people what are they going to send? You know, they're sending stuff at us." And we know Japan made the threat to North Korea that if the missile comes their way, they're launching everything at them. They'll shoot down the missile. They're ready to go to war with them. If North Korea does this, they do that, we're going to blow you out of the water. We're going to, So the Japanese are pretty much saying, we're not going to take any shit from you. Now, that said, this is a fifth nuclear test. The North Korean nuclear program seems to have a lot of setbacks in it. So when we hear all the fear-mongering around the world, oh my God, North Korea's got an intercontinental missile. Okay, this is like the fifth test that failed. Like failed launch. So again, they're not there yet. When it's like, okay, they got 5 perfect launches in a row, then yeah, there's cause for concern. But at that, but you still can't underestimate it either. I mean, for those that, North Korea is nothing. An intercontinental ballistic missile is a threat, no matter how you look at it. But it just shows what's going on there. But that's not where the really scary stuff is coming from. North Korea, again, I think is more the useful idiot to China. Really, North Korea, they can't really go rogue on China and do their own thing. They can't. Because if they did, China would just tell the United States, yeah, go ahead and have a field day with them. And they could run over top. The only thing that keeps North Korea around is the fact that China backs North Korea. And Russia to a point. Remember, North Korea is a sought-after target for the United States. Because the fact that it borders Russia and China. And because of that, you could put missile systems that would completely engulf Russia and China with missile systems, U.S. missile systems. Now, of course, everybody's missile-palooza. It's been missile-palooza this year's. The amount of missiles moving around, that's all that's moving around, it seems. Well, not all, but it's like just every other day there's missiles here, missiles there. Over there in Georgia, was it Georgia? Sorry, Romania. I keep saying Georgia, but Romania. Correct if I said that in a previous WW3 update. But Romania, they're putting on an older version of the Patriot missile system, the PAC-2 missiles. So these, like the most modern U.S. missiles, aren't really that effective against shooting down things. In controlled tests, yeah, they show that they can shoot down some things, but they're really not that reliable. Same thing with Iron Dome. It's really not that reliable. So it's kind of funny that there's so much provoking from the United States surrounding Russia and China with these missile systems that may or may not work very well. And the Russians and Chinese seems to have better countermeasures for these missiles anyway, because they have missiles of their own. The big threat that's NATO's worried about is the Iskander missile systems that are kind of, anytime a Patriot missile system goes up, an Iskander rolls into place. And the difference between the Patriot missile system and the Iskanders is the Iskanders are very, very mobile. It's a truck with 2 missiles that have about a 500-mile range. So, so basically, you little bastard. Freaking mosquitoes. That's why I'm not outside right now filming. Mosquitoes are they're bad enough in here, let alone out there. But, so Romania has all kinds of missiles going in. Russians open up forward radar stations, move Iskanders closer to the border. And the Russians still have their doctrine that they said, if they feel threatened, they reserve the right to preemptively strike these missile systems, which the Russians won't do unless they really are threatened. I still say the only thing that gets a Russian response is an invasion of Russia, and the way the rhetoric is in Washington and the recent rhetoric in the Pentagon talking about doing a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia, just a bad idea. So obviously, not only are tensions worth between the United States and NATO and Russia since the Cold War, but they're actually probably higher tensions than what they were during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're at that level. A lot of people don't realize that because of the things that the media should be talking about, they're not, and the things that they're talking about are irrelevant or fear-mongering or whatever. So there's that going on, which is kind of really tense. So to me, I just want to let people know what's going on. Now we're going to go over to Sweden. Our friends in Sweden. Sweden is and I got a fair amount of Swedish subscribers and stuff like that. And they tell me what goes on in Sweden and stuff like that. Sweden is bizarro world to the outside of the rest of the Western world. Here's the thing. Okay, you've got Sweden that pretty much has its borders down, letting in migrants, the same as the rest of the European countries. They're over batshit crazy with the political correctness in their government to the point where it's nihilistic to their people. But then they grow a spine for NATO. You know what I mean? Like, okay, they want to be aggressive and join NATO to be aggressive towards, maybe not be aggressive towards Russia, but jump on the bandwagon, which they don't need to join NATO at all. It's just going to cost them money they don't have. It's the same thing here in Canada. We don't need to be a part of NATO. And you could participate in NATO without being a part of it. I mean, Sweden and Norway have been non-NATO members for years, and same with Finland, non-NATO members for years, participating with NATO. What's the difference? Really, what are they going to get extra? We could look at Poland, for example. Yeah, they got a whole bunch of new American F-16s and tanks and stuff like that to upgrade their military. Problem is they can't afford to run the stuff they got, so they had to divert back to the old Soviet stuff that they bought in the first place, MiG-29s, T-72s, and et cetera, et cetera. So they've got all this new stuff, but they just can't afford to use it. So they really didn't gain anything, but now they're like priority number one for Russia to knock off the map if things go awry. So you got all these war drills hosted in Poland. It really, it makes sense to a point, but on the other hand, it's not the benefit that I think a lot of Eastern European countries think NATO is. Plus, you have to understand that I think the war goal is to have the war in Eastern Europe. That was the whole probably one of the main points of destabilizing the Ukraine, was to get Russia to roll into the Ukraine, to get onto Poland's border, to invoke Article 5. Latvia is the one that NATO is really worried about, that they say even a British general wrote a book about a thermonuclear war with Russia in 2017, using today's current events to basically, point out that on this current course that we are, could lead us to that. And it's very clear. I mean, even big players, the biggest war hawk in the world has got to be like Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski. And even those guys, particularly Henry Kissinger, said in the past couple of years, so a couple of times, hey, the United States is provoking Russia, and he would know because he's a player. He's the guy that makes these things happen. He's the guy responsible for many things. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, which never happened, which got them into Vietnam, which makes him a war criminal. Don't get me wrong. I am no fan of Henry Kissinger, one of the most evil people on the planet. George Soros, Zbigniew Brzezinski with his grand chessboard. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, this guy froths out the mouth at the thought of doing a nuclear strike on Russia. This man can't wait to get people killed in a war. Very dangerous man. And unfortunately, these are the puppeteers behind the scenes that do get these things going. Like Hillary Clinton said, she takes her marching orders from Mr. Kissinger, which tells you you're going to war big time. So Libya, probably a Kissinger plan. I've listened to Kissinger enough to know that this man is batshit crazy evil. If you don't do what they want, there's going to be war. That is the Anglo-American Empire spokesperson right there. On top of that, you have people like Jacob Rothschild out there last year, whatever, talking about that we're right in the same kind of predicament right before World War II broke out. And we kind of are in similarities. There is similarities. Similarities with Japan, and instead of Japan and the United States, it's Japan and China. And the United States is obviously provoking China. I know there's some people that think, oh, no, well, the Chinese are expanding this and they're expanding. The Chinese aren't really doing anything they haven't been doing for the past 300 years, so to speak. There's nothing new with China. They're expanding to a degree, yes, but so is other people's. You have to understand the disputed islands You have other people building islands. The Philippines are building islands. Indonesia's building islands. There's a whole bunch of people in that region building islands. The only people that get flagged on it for it is China. So really, I think even Taiwan's building islands. So the disputed zone has been disputed for 300 years. And why is it relevant now? And what does it have to do with the United States? Oh, well, trade routes and stuff like that. I don't think, no. It's not a good enough excuse to be provoking that much. So China knows what it's really about. And again, it's a multifaceted war, and there's a lot of fronts here. The economic one is the main one, and again, it's empire fighting empire. I've talked about this many times. Transatlantic Anglo-American empire versus the Eurasian Pacific empire. If you were to split the world in two, you would see who's on each side. You have Russia, China, Iran, India probably going to go to that side, and the BRICS nations, and then a whole host of other people siding with China. And then on the other side, you have Europe, Canada, the United States, the Anglo-American empire. Basically the Rothschild banking system, which is as criminal as possible for this one world government, one world order, regulated by the UN, enforced by NATO. You get the idea. It's all one system, fighting with another system, empirism. This empire wants to rule the roost versus this empire. So that's what it's really about at the top of it. What they want out of it, well, there's a lot of factions fighting with each other within. But getting back to Sweden, yeah. So Sweden now, which I think the Swedish military is actually quite clever in the way they set their stuff up. They don't have the budget, obviously, but they've got the soft Gripen. It works very well. It's a very advanced little airplane. It's simple. It's practical. It's a hot-rodded F-5, basically. It's a great little airplane for Sweden. I don't think they should change that. I don't think they would gain anything by going to the F-16 or like that large numbers. I think they have some F-16s, but the thing is that the Saab Gripen, it's domestically made. They work it. They've got their own ships. They've got their own navy. Their divers are world class. I had met a Swedish diver years ago, and him and I, were playing what you call volleyball or whatever in a pool and whatever. And he was telling me all the stuff how they trained in Sweden, stuff like that. How much effort they put into their diving personnel. And we did a couple of laps around the pool, and I tell you, I had a hard time keeping up. That's when I was in shape. When I was like 18 or whatever. So so he was telling me all the stuff that they did. How they set mines and stuff like that. Send divers out for this and that. And, it was very interesting, the stuff he was telling me how they did it. And so their navy is nowhere near the size. Nobody's going to match Russia. But I mean, like anything, like in World War II, NATO didn't exist. People joined up with each other without having to need NATO. That type of thing. So I don't think Sweden really needs to be a part of NATO. I think it'll be probably worse for them if they are. And one of the things Russia says, well, you join NATO, we target a warhead specifically for you, and it's the same thing that would happen to Norway, Finland, etc., etc. Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Romania, all these things will be on the Russian hit list. Now, to me, I think they really want the war in Eastern Russia, or Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Russia, Eastern Europe, to basically wipe out people in places like Estonia and Hungary and maybe even Poland or whatever, to have the war contained there with Russia. Problem is the Russians aren't going to contain a war there. They've got a plan for all over. Now, one of the things I said that the Russians would be doing is putting more effort on anti-satellite taking out satellites. That'd be their first priority. They know that's their first priority. Why? Because if you can't see, you can't fight, right? And the United States is so heavily dependent, and so is NATO, so heavily dependent on satellites. Now, AWACS you could kind of call an earthbound satellite, but the problem is there's only so many AWACS out there. There's way more satellites. However, Russia just tested a couple of missiles to successfully shoot down satellites, and they were successful. So they have counter to the satellites. So I say 2 weeks after a war starts, even if it didn't go nuclear, 2 weeks after the war starts, you would have very easily no satellites. No one's going to be able to use Twitter or Facebook. I'll tell you that. We're going to go back to an analog system. Break out the old rabbit ears and antennas, you know what I'm saying? Because that, they know if they can do that, that'd be priority number one. The Chinese already have these kind of... I don't know if there would be a passive version of anti-satellite technology, or if they have the ability to fry out electronics or whatever. But basically, from Earth, they have these beams that can basically blind satellites. So that in itself, they basically look like these gigantic round ball spotlights, and they basically fire a laser, and they can blind satellites, and the Chinese have been using these, and they know that that's a priority as well. Now, the difference between the Russian military, one thing that's different between Russia and China is the mobility of Russia over China. China has lots of manpower, but they don't quite have the mobility to get the manpower here or there in the large numbers Russia does. Russia can move a lot of men very quickly. In other words, if Red Dawn needs to take place, they can pull it off. That said, trying to invade Russia or China would be a death sentence for any country. These are countries that can clearly fight back, even though there's some people out there that think that, the Russian military is nothing, we'd wipe the floor with them. I watch what's going on. I know how the American military trains. I know how other militaries trains and stuff like that. The conflict that would ensue would basically be something never seen before in history, and would make World War II look like a picnic. The powerful weapons that are now, the weapons were powerful in World War II, but now you've got, I always like using the Russian TOS-1 as an example, the flamethrower, aka it's a rocket launcher built on a T-72 chassis. Fires 24 of these thermobaric rockets, okay, and can take out basically 8 city blocks. Unbelievable, and that's conventional firepower. Now, the thing is there's thousands of these things that they're going to have. Right now there might be only a few hundred of them, or maybe even less than 100 of them. But think of that amount of firepower. 10 of those running around a city takes out the city. You know what I mean? It can devastate a city, let alone, the more powerful weapons out there. It's just unbelievable. And then, of course, the amount of cruise missiles the Russians have is unbelievable as well. Now, that said, there's a lot of, the Americans have tons of firepower too, there's no doubt about that. But when you do watch Russian air power, it is very barbaric and crude in the sense of it's a lot of dummy ordnance that fall, but it's just, okay, well, you don't need a sledgehammer to swat flies sometimes, but the Russians always had the theory, if you don't have accuracy, you just make a bigger bang. Their rocket attacks are always just incredible to watch. They work. Now, against what would they use them against? Well, advancing troops, for example, an advancing column of tanks. Okay, so you'd have an Su-34 flying around in the air, and I forget the name of their, I think it's the AN-12 or whatever, jamming signals and radars and stuff like that. Su-34s and Su-24s would be basically jamming radars and taking out, ADAT systems and stuff like that. So the air defense, and then in comes the Frogfoots, almost pretty much an analog airplane still, with just, basically a bomb truck just come in and just strafe the shit out of everything. And the thing is they come in fast, and the same with the tank brigades. Again, the recent admission from NATO that if, Russia, if we were to provoke Russia in Eastern Europe, their tank brigades would just have a field day. It's not so much that the T-72 is better than a Leopard tank or an Abrams tank or stuff like that, because they're not really. It's not that. It's the tactics. It's the tank superiority. You have to understand, the Russians, they strength in numbers is, quantity is the quality of a Soviet tactic of overwhelm them with numbers. Let's say you have, 4 Abrams tanks against 12, because usually Russians always do everything in packs of 6, 6 attack helicopters, 6 fighters, 4 or 6 fighters, 6 tanks. They usually do that type of thing against 4 Abrams. Now, let's say the Abrams can kill them 2 to 1. Okay, well, even at that, they're still going to lose, right? Now, the thing is it's a lot more expensive to replace the Abrams than it is a T-72. And the newest version of T-72 seems to be able to take a lot of hits. The tank's still old, whatever. And then, of course, you got the new Armada tanks, which should be rolling online fairly soon. The T-90s are well proven to take anti-tank missile hits. So the thing is at the end of the day, you're still left with more Soviet tanks, or Russian Federation tanks. I say Soviet again. It's showing my age, I guess. So it's things like that. The Russians have accounted for that. So when a U.S. NATO general says we'd be in for a rude awakening, that the Soviet tank, the Russian tank After monitoring the Ukraine, the Russian tank tactics are superior to the NATO ones. I don't think it's so much that they're superior, it's just that you can't deal with the numbers. Now, that's just if you're talking tank to tank. You have to factor in attack helicopters and stuff like that. Sure, the Apache helicopter, I think, is a better helicopter in a lot of ways. It's the best attack helicopter in the world, but you're dealing with, again, superior, like how many Hawkums and Black Sharks are out there, like, what, 5,000? You know what I mean, that type of thing. Then plus all the other stuff. The Hinds I don't think so much, but even at that, they come in at over 200 miles an hour. These things are coming. They come in fast and they hit hard, and a lot of firepower. So the Russians are willing. The men are still expendable to the Russians. Run over top of them, come back and get your man after. It's the same thing the Chinese do. We saw this in North Korea, where the tactic is very simple: overwhelm your opponent with. It was the whole concept of the AK-47 was based on. When Klishnikov, who was a tank guy, designed the rifle, some people said he ripped the idea off of the Sturmgewehr 44, but that debate goes on. Whatever. Thing is his concept was this: design a firearm that was small. Okay, everybody jumps out. Whenever the battle ensues, everybody jumps out, and you just start spraying and praying with your AK-47 and your buddy with the your other three buddies with the Dragunovs. Take careful aim and start picking people off. Right. Now the thing is while you're spraying and praying, you're going to expend a lot of ammo in a very short amount of time, but it might be enough to keep the heads down long enough to win. Basically, you're overwhelming them with firepower. This tactic clearly works because this is the exact tactic everybody uses. NATO uses it. The United States uses it. Us Canadians use it. If you hear a pop somewhere, one shot's fired there, you fire 100 back, or 15 back, or 100 back. Whatever. You spray and pray. A sod gunner, their first shots are not like this. Their first shots are like this. Why? Because he's over there somewhere. As long as we're in the right direction, the bullets are skimming off. Mind you, a lot of innocent people get killed that way. But then once you know where they are, then you can home in on them. But you spray until you just to put heads down. That's the thing. And that really goes back to the blitzkrieg tactics of the Germans. Rush the position. So you might lose 10 guys rushing the position, but trust me, you're going to get them on the reload. And it works. That tactic works unless you've got barriers in front that stop the advance. That's the only thing that's why they put out barbed wire. It stops the advance. Otherwise, they'll run over your position before you get a chance to reload. So overwhelm the position. That tactic hasn't really changed. And it still seems like only the Russians and Chinese kind of use it. Now, mind you, that can be a downside for them, too, if you're anticipating that and luring them into doing that. But that said, it doesn't mean they're going to be stupid enough to use it all the time. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. That's where their tactics have been refined quite well. You send everything you got all at once. Yeah, you're going to lose a lot of men. You're going to lose a lot of tanks, a lot of airplanes, or whatever. But on the second battle, on the second charge, you might have the upper hand of numbers and tactics again. Again, we saw it where it works. We saw it where it fails. In Vietnam, we've seen many, and in North Korea, we've seen several times where these massive rushes didn't work. The 28 Canadians that held off, basically staved off World War III when 1,500 Chinese attacked 28 guys, and they held them off for something like 19 hours or something like that. Because of the way the position was fortified, a handful of guys could stop and advance on something like that. And the guys, the North Koreans got within hand grenade range. Some of the North Korean shell casings were flying forward into the Canadian positions. That's how close they got. It's pretty impressive. I think we lost one guy, and then six. I think most of them got wounded, but. Again, and they were running out of ammo and everything, but because the tactics were superior on our side, and we were fortified for that kind of charge, they couldn't run over top of us. And we were able to take them out in a bottleneck. And they did 3, 4, 5 charges, again, 1,500, that's the numbers, and I forget how many hundreds got killed trying to take this position. So, again, there are times when it doesn't work. Because if they would have overrun that position, they ran over the Australian and the Irish position, I think, just before they got to our position on that Battle of Compiègne. But if they would have overrun our position at the time, they had B-29, the Americans had B-29 nukes ready to go, with nukes ready to go, if they wouldn't have been able to hold off that. So obviously people do know how to counter tactics. But the thing is if you know when to deploy that tactic, it works very well. And it'll take out a position. The bigger problem is Russia's no longer solely an analog military. They've modernized their soldiers to be basically just as modernized as the United States. The only difference is that their communications and satellite, they don't depend on satellite communication the same way. They basically have the same type of communication, but stuff that can be easily repaired on the ground. And that in itself, is kind of a game changer. But it gives redundancy, and it makes it more difficult to blind the Russians. Whereas the Russians, again, taking out satellites is now going to be something that they're going to have fun doing it. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, how many satellites are up there? Build this many missiles. Okay. They only have to get lucky once, right? That's the thing. Next to that, going over to Syria, well, it comes out, if you were watching, I know some people love him or hate him, Alex Jones. I always say I love Alex Jones's guests, and he had two or three guests on last night that were talking about the Fast and Furious program and stuff like that, and how it's still going on, and that the Congress is doing nothing about it, and more importantly, that the weapons that are, like, we're not just talking rifles and M16s and stuff like that. That's going, sure, but we're talking like the Stinger missiles, the TOW missiles, the war machine stuff that keeps showing up in Syria in the hands of ISIS for some funny reason, right? So we pretty much know who's doing it. But the thing is they've pretty much, the guys, and again, I can imagine they're going to kill this guy, but he's like, we're going to get evidence of you doing this. And again, this goes back to the people who signed the papers to basically make sure that the weapons now go to the cartels in this, they send the weapons to Mexico, and the Mexican government basically sends them off to probably Saudi Arabia or whatever, and then Saudi Arabia, this is all CIA, the FBI turns a blind eye to it, whatever, and the stuff is documented from this guy's, he's been talking about it for about a couple of years now, and he works in the intelligence agencies, basically, or one of them anyway, and basically saying, yeah, the weapon, we're sending them directly to ISIS. So that type of thing, yeah, that's what's going on there. The other thing that's going on is that, because we know, the Saudis, they never hid the fact that they were arming ISIS at all. No, we're trying to overthrow Assad, so we're going to, they say we don't really support ISIS. We support, the Syrian Arab Democracy League, or whatever they call it, that thing now. Basically, new name for the ISIS guys. It's the same fighters. And the thing is they're there to overthrow Assad. That's it. And again, my video on the Greater Israel Project, which is coming out anytime this week for the making of this video. I just did part 2 last night. Part 3 will be out. It's going to be entitled, if you want to understand why there's wars all over the place, you have to understand what the Greater Israel Project is. It doesn't just stop in Israel. Trust me, it is a regional thing. It's balkanization of the region, which is war everywhere. And pretty much everything they talked about back then is what you're seeing now. And it is in kind of why anti-Semitism is rising, the Greater Israel Project, the Oden Plan. And the Oden Plan is basically the most descriptive. He was a journalist in Israel that basically, blew the lid off the thing, so to speak, or explained it to the people what they were doing, how they were going to, basically have Zionist supremacy throughout the entire Middle East. And well, it's not just going to stop the Middle East. That's what Plan 1. Plan 2 is like United Nations New World Order, one world government, one world military, all that type. And it's all controlled by pretty much the same people. Again, who signs off on it, who comes up with the ideas, it's always the same people, right? So you can watch those videos. You might not like everything I say in them, but we are living in, it's the world we live in, and we have to discuss it. That type of thing. So that'll explain, when you understand that, you understand why they're shipping weapons to ISIS. Again, it goes back to when Obama would try, remember when there was the U.S. warship, I can't remember which warship it was, firing batteries of cruise missiles, Tomahawk missiles into Syria, taking out all kinds of Assad's structure. And they were saying, oh no, we're taking out just the weapons depots. No, they were taking out the grain, the oil refineries, the power stations. which is something that is normal in war, that you take out all the resources, right, to basically debilitate Assad. And, of course, Obama was making the plea for everybody to go to war. Of course, the American people rejected it. They've had enough war. And then, of course, right after that, ISIS shows up. So ISIS shows up with all these American-made weapons. The luckiest terrorist group in the world ends up getting 2,300 Humvees, 70 Abrams tanks, I can't remember, 50 artillery guns, tens of thousands of munitions and ammo and all that. They keep finding these American-made anti-tank weapons that were, that were sold to Germany, and then somehow they ended up in Saudi Arabia, and then from Saudi Arabia, they seem to have dropped them off accidentally into Syria, and then, of course, the ISIS guys find them, and then now they've got anti-tank and surface-to-air missiles. The Libyan thing, Ambassador Stevens being killed in Libya, over the Manpad launchers, of about 20,000 of those. And I mean, look at all these airliners that are getting shot down in Egypt. Shot down, who knows? They're probably getting shot down. The thing is that, it's like... when one country keeps having airplanes drop out of the sky for mysterious reasons, you got to kind of wonder, right? So again, they just basically, I'm not saying there's no legitimate terrorists there, of course there is, but it is pretty damning. It shows you, again, and the Saudis coming out in the past week or so, talking about how if you, again, it's the Mexican standoff between Israel, the United States, and Saudi Arabia. Basically, if you rat me out, I'll rat you out. So Saudi Arabia's, 9/11 was an inside job so that they could get the war on terror going. But the whole thing is you have to take it back further. Nobody's implicated. This is why I distrust Russia a bit. Well, there are no good guys there. This is one of the things I say about Putin. Putin should expose Israel the whole way, because it is, at the end of the day, it really does come back to the Oden plan. Stuff like that. So the Greater Israel Project. And he doesn't say anything. So why is he not? Why is not throwing them? I understand why the Saudis aren't throwing Israel under the bus yet. Is because Israel isn't making threats on Saudi, and they're not. Israel's trying to stay under the radar on this one. But at the end of the day, the Israeli government and the Saudi royal family are one and the same. They're joint at the hip. And they both are supporting ISIS. Again, you have Mossad generals talking about how they're gone to jail for this. In fact, some of the propaganda pictures out there you see of ISIS is the two generals, Mossad generals, that were training up the ISIS fighters. And again, we know about over in Jordan the thousands of fighters that were trained up by the U.S. and the Mossad and a few other intelligence agencies, that type of thing. So that's what's going on there. As far as airstrikes and air power, we have about 5,000 Kurds moving in with the Syrian Arab Army and a few other groups. The Kurds are just taking town after town after town, flushing the ISIS guys out. The U.S. coalition forces that are in there, I think there's like 200, 250 troops. I think there's about 500 troops that they've admitted that are in there by now, working with the Kurds, so to speak. But are they really? Who knows? Maybe what they could be doing is, like giving the ISIS guys the heads up to get out of the way. Or some political analysts are speculating that Obama's trying to save face, to say, okay, well, we'll watch the Kurds take town after town after town, and then give the credit to the U.S. military, saying, oh yeah, we're beating ISIS. So, it is what it is. That said, I think Turkey's problems are just beginning, because as ISIS is eliminated, they're going to go back to these other countries. The Kurds are really outing, which guarantees war between the Kurds. I mean, we already see what the Turks are doing to the Kurds in that area. So that's going to flare up something severe. But I think it's going to blow back on Turkey. I think, if anything, the Russians will just back the Kurds. And if they start backing the Kurds, maybe not tomorrow, but once ISIS is almost gone, they're going to back the Kurds really heavy, and then Turkey's going to have... That's how they're going to destabilize Turkey, is by, because the Russians are going to get payback for that pilot. I mean, they already did sanctions. They already did this. Turkey's going to hurt for this. And again, with Erdogan being as crazy as he is, again, he could not do the things he's doing without the blessing of NATO and the United States and the Rothschild banking system, etc., etc. That's why he's able to ramp up the rhetoric against Russia, calling for war and this and that. I haven't heard of any more skirmishes in Azerbaijan and Armenia. I don't know if they've nipped that one in the bud. The battles were pretty gory. We're talking like 300 men a day, 300 tanks, like a real almost World War II style battle going on for a couple of weeks there. But I haven't heard of anything new, so I'll have to keep an eye on that one. Next to that, I guess I think I've got everything covered there. So I covered the missile, the anti-satellite, North Korea, and yeah. Oh, the final one. Something I said a long time ago about Putin to watch for, and this kind of shows us that you have a lot of economists out there talking about, even guys like Jim Rogers and stuff like that, we're around the corner from the next huge economic collapse. I'm still sticking to my guns. This is where I disagree with Greg Manarino, Peter Schiff, Max Kaiser, even Warren Buffett, even Jim Rogers, that there is going to be no economic collapse until war comes. That's what they're going to use to blame the collapse on. There might be one in Europe. I think what we're seeing in Europe right now, again, is a rehatch of 2008 where they're going to divert the crash again to Europe first. That's what they did last time. That's what they're going to do again. And you're seeing all these protests in the streets, and I mean, it's just crazy over there what's going on. But they're going to, this time around, they're going to use the migrant crisis, saying, "Oh well, the reason why all the governments are broke is because the migrants came in and they broke the system." So people will just blame them and not the actual policymakers that made all this batshit craziness go on in the first place. Which I don't think it's going to work. I think there's too many people who know who's doing what. But one of the things I said, I don't know how long ago I said this, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I don't know. Maybe last year. I don't remember when I said this, but I do remember saying it a few times. When we get close to go time, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying World War III is imminent. If you follow these videos, you know what the plays are. You know how the drills are working out. You know how, again, if you go back to my very first World War III videos in probably around 2010 or whatever, the amount of escalation from then to now is very, very clear. We are in the new Cold War. There's no doubt about that. But one of the things I said is when we get close to war, some of the final statements from Russia will be Putin playing the crazy man. Kind of how Kim Jong-un plays the crazy man and throws tantrums from time, and they start shelling into the south, and you know, they do these drills at sea and blow up other people's ships and do all these crazy things that they do to get attention. Well, Putin, again, he's been telling, you know, we're ready for a full nuclear response if it has to be that way. But apparently on Russian TV, they were talking about now whether he's going to do it or not. But this could be a precursor. So I think this is a very vital thing to keep in mind. That when Putin plays the crazy man, kind of like a North Korean tantrum, he's going to gain the attention of the world. They kind of say, this is about as close as you want to get. We're serious. Back the fuck off. And they're talking about, yes, you guessed it, nuking an island. Yeah. I believe it's an island in the Baltics, to show how capable the Russian strategic nuclear forces are. I can't remember the name of the island, whatever, but it is close enough to Europe, like I said it would be, to gain their attention. And this is also coming out just around the time this new Sarmat ICBM, again, probably the most terrifying apocalyptic weapon ever devised by mankind, coming online. They're going to be testing that thing probably fairly soon. We've seen tons of warhead tests, tons of missile tests, but we haven't seen a nuclear test. And a nuclear test, I mean, the first Cold War, that's what set off the first Cold War was Khrushchev's big bomb, right? And that entered us into the official Cold War. Right now, the mainstream media won't call it a Cold War. We are officially in a Cold War. The escalation is there. But if it has to take a nuclear weapon to make it official, then so be it. But that said, the Russians will be doing this as a show of force. They will be doing this. It's probably going to knock out power in neighboring countries or whatever. It's going to be devastating. And the thing is that the devastation, the world's going to, you know, hate Russia for this. They're going to say you're this, that, and the other thing. But people are going to look at the amount of destruction one warhead's going to do. And then people are going to start, that's when you're going to see the anti-war protesters come out. That's when you're going to see that. That will work to Russia's advantage. They know this. that will also, like put us on the brink to a great degree. It puts us on the brink. That said, because then at that point, the Russians are serious enough that they will launch, and that NATO needs to back off. Because you got some generals out there. Again, these are the guys that for some reason nobody listens to, because they're like, okay, well, we need to rethink about how we're going to go about dealing with Russia. Obviously, trying to strongman them again. They're going to go with the Napoleon theory. They'll burn down Moscow rather than they burnt down when Napoleon invaded. They burnt down Moscow so they couldn't get. If we can't have it, nobody can. Well, the globe is the same thing. If you can't have it, neither can we. Or if we can't have it, neither can you. The Russian expansionism, it still has to be dealt with in other ways. But to bring us to the point that we're at, I mean, they're talking about lighting off a nuke. Like I said, they would. Till we see it, it's not done. But we've seen this coming. We connected the dots. We knew that at some point Putin is going to have to play the crazy man. But after you make that kind of a thermonuclear statement and nuke an island and completely devastate that island, which is not something that the planet needs right now. I mean, and what kind of batshit crazy chain reaction does that cause? Russia tests a nuke today. Pakistan and India test nukes tomorrow. You know what I mean? This country tests nukes, that country, and we're back to where we were. Like some people think that we wouldn't survive a nuclear war at all. You have to understand, there's been over 2,200 declassified nuclear tests that have been, most of them, underground and above ground, some in the atmosphere, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea that that's a lot of radiation just from tests. The radiation doesn't go away. It's not in populated areas, but you get the idea. Radiation is radiation. You really don't want to be blasting that stuff out, anywhere. But you understand the statement that they're making. And again, the Russian government, they don't care about the man on the street that's going to protest. They're really showing, no, you won't be able to stop the devastation. You won't, like, the Russians even have said it several times, that these people think that they can have a nuclear war, and several what you call conspiracy theorists have been saying that the world elites think they can have this nuclear war and survive it, and they come up and restart the system again. They're completely insane. Even Putin said Hillary Clinton victory almost guarantees a thermonuclear war. Why? Because she is insane. Unfortunately, Hillary supporters are pretty brain dead, and you'll never impress upon them how evil that woman actually is. Now, Putin, is he a good guy? No, he's not a good guy, but he's not conquering the world either. Again, Russia, how many military bases do they have outside Russia? 10. The United States, 700. You know what I mean? So, again, Hillary Clinton, when she wins presidency, I think Putin would most likely, if he was going to let off a nuke, it's going to be before the 2016 election. The reason being is because the only one talking reasonability is Donald Trump, talking about negotiating with Russia. He's the only one talking about that. I think he would be tough with Russia. A lot of people think, no, Donald Trump will get us into nuclear war. Again, listen to his speeches. Listen to 1, listen to 2, listen to 10. Listen to the man speak. That's how you learn about these people. Hillary Clinton, listen to her speak. She is insane. She is insane. Just because they don't talk to themselves and ramble on and blah, 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 and act like a kook, doesn't mean what they're talking about is rational. Henry Kissinger is evil. He's insane. She takes her marching orders from Henry Kissinger. Zebra Brzezinski, all these people. Zebra Brzezinski, that man is a lunatic and a half. This man cannot wait to have a nuclear apocalypse. He froths at the mouth. He's almost as insane as Insane McCain, which we haven't heard from in a while, which is not a bad thing. Like John McCain, again, we're just going to nuke Russia, and they're going to respond. But I think when people see that, and it's going to be larger than the Tsar bomb, or Tazar bomb, or Tsar bomb, however you want to pronounce it. It's going to probably be a full-scale powered bomb. The idea is it needs to be a statement enough that there's effects felt by it. That not just that you've seen the devastation, but that power grids get knocked out here and there. Oops, we made bomb bigger than we thought. We didn't know it knocked out power. Oops, not bad. But did you see how big it was? That would be devastating above your city. Oh yeah. And they know. Where do you put missile now? That's what's going to happen. That's what they're going for. They're calling the bluff of NATO. But like I said, when the Russians call bluff, they go. The Chinese, when they call bluff, if they win big. If they lose nothing. They lose very little. The Russians, when they win the entire table. But if they lose an arm. You know what I mean? So it is a dangerous game that they are playing. The Russian nuclear forces, I think, are way more advanced and ready than the American ones. The warheads, they bob and weave as they come in. You can't shoot these things down easily, if you can shoot them down at all. And it's going to be impossible to detect these things coming when the first stage is what the Russians are going to do is shoot down satellites. Now you can't detect these things coming. By the time you detect them, you have seconds to shoot them down because they're coming in at a speed of about Mach 7 plus to Mach 12. Maybe even faster. Maybe even as high as Mach 20. These things are coming in like laser beams. They're going to come in so fast, virtually unstoppable. Now, whether this rumor is true or not, this is something to keep in mind. But the word on the grapevine was, and you're seeing all these mysterious streaks in the sky off the coast of California in the last couple of months. All these big things. I think a lot of them are weapons tests. But the thing is that they said that the Russians had worked out a deal to fire a dummy warhead and nuclear, basically a simulated attack on the United States. And basically the U.S., the Russians, I think, the way the rumor went was the Russians set this up this year or last year, whatever, early this year or last year, that they would fire the missile. All the United States had to do was intercept it. That's it. They couldn't. So the warheads came in. They were dummy warheads, just the way the Russians test their warheads. They test missiles more frequently, particularly their older missiles. They test the missiles a couple of times a year. Last year I think it was like one a month. Like Missile Palooza. It's probably the most ICBMs tested in world history was probably 2015. We're talking sub-launches. We're talking the full battery launch from the Bory class sub. Again, a first in history to have a full nuclear simulated missile launch where they actually launch the missiles, the ballistic missiles. Unbelievable. Like a full battery launch. That's again, nobody's ever done that in history. Very, very scary, or that I know of. It was a Russian first anyway. So again, all these firsts, these giant stuff like that. But the idea that the Russians, okay, you guys, you need to understand that you're not going to be able to stop what's coming at you. So that leaves us with this. They don't want to stop it. If they're still provoking, still doing their thing, they don't want to stop it. They want it to happen. So that kind of makes a bit of a case for Russia not really so much being the good guys, but the guys who don't want to get us into war. They've had so many opportunities. If you follow this channel, you know that the United States has provoked them. Turkey shooting down their airplanes. They've had the annexing of Crimea came on the heels of the overthrow using neo-Nazis in the Ukraine to overthrow the government, which I don't think they're keeping too good control on the neo-Nazis there. And I mean literal neo-Nazis. I'm not calling them the Ukrainian military neo-Nazis. I'm calling the Azov battalion neo-Nazis because that's what they are. They openly admit that. But you could see that it was clearly designed to provoke a Russian response. But the only thing that I think gets a Russian response is an invasion in of Russian borders. It's the only thing that's going to do. That said, we could be leading to a Kursk-style incident. Now you could say the Su-24 incident, the Turkish incident. We'll call it the Turkish incident in Syria. We could be. Something like that is going to snap, and it could put us on the brink. But if Putin does go with this, now mind you, this was on Russian media, it could be propaganda and prospering, but the idea is the Russians are warning us as much as they can warn us. At some point, they're going to have to show us what they mean. And when they do, Putin plays the crazy man, the world will go, oh my God, Putin is such a horrible, crazy man, he's unstable, we got to get him out of there, oh my God, and then people will be saying, yeah, but how about we don't just don't provoke them? It makes it impossible for the mainstream media to not bring up the conversation of the expansion of NATO. And this will work to the Russian hand for sure. Again, they're well ahead. These people like Henry Kissinger and Brzezinski and George Soros and stuff like that, they think they're really smart people. No, they're consistent. I'll give them that on what they want to do. But the thing is they're predictable because they're psychopaths. So the Russians have a field day, making them look stupid. And making them fail. The problem is every time these plans fail, we pay the price. Again, how many people die? The people that are still caught up in their, well, my military is better than their military. You're a fucking idiot. Like you're missing the big picture. There are going to be no winners in this, even if it doesn't go nuclear. The amount of people that die fighting with Russia and China at the same time, and it's a two-punch. Those people will back each other. Now, if the Chinese were to throw Russia under the bus, that might be a different story. But they can't throw each other under the bus because, Russia could probably stand World War III alone against NATO and the United States. But with China, you have to understand, Russia is pretty much equal to the size of NATO and the United States in their military. Because that's what they have to take care of. Right now, the Russian doctrine is still defensive. They don't have a globalized plan of regime change here, there, and everywhere. That type of thing. It doesn't mean that they're not trying to influence countries around the world. They pretty much got South America on it. China has South America for sure. China has most of Africa. Middle East, is working towards China, but I would say Russia has probably as much influence in the Middle East in the back channels as the NATO and the U.S. and the Anglo-American Empire has in the front channels. So we'll have to watch and see what happens. Very interesting times, scary times too. But next to that, I guess I'm probably missing some stuff, but I think this is the beginning of the Putin playing the crazy man. This could be a sign of it. We'll have to watch, see what happens. I don't think they're going to do it soon, but I say the closer we get to the 2016 election, we could see a nuclear detonation from Russia as a show of force for the world to see. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Links down below. If you want to make, thank you very much to everybody who has. If you want to make a couple of bucks for yourself, you can check out my TSU link. It's also down below. It doesn't cost you anything to sign up, and it's a lot of fun. Next to that, you can check out my WW3 Updates Facebook page. I basically just put this video there, and you can put links. I do ask people put links for everybody to see rather than send me them privately, because if I miss them, at least everybody else gets to see them, because I can't keep up with all of them. And it's great that you guys do that. Thank you so much. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. G'day, hi, and welcome. All right. Got a World War III update for you today. There may even be a special appearance by our favorite leader over there in North Korea. Well, maybe I'll start with North Korea. So, in North Korea, if we were to listen to the North Korean newscasting lady, she would say, "Today is a very glorious day because the sun is shining for victory, and we will do our nuclear test today." And they did another missile test, but apparently it failed. It failed because it was sabotaged by the West. Yeah. So Kim Jong-un is, "Okay, maybe we made it fail on purpose to make you think we didn't have the power. With my pudgy fist, I can hit the button and launch a missile at random. Fear me. Fear me. Hear my voice. Fear me." So Kim Jong-un, he's there doing the same thing. So Japan is like shitting bricks. They're like, "Oh my God, these people what are they going to send? They're sending stuff at us." And we know Japan made the threat to North Korea that if the missile comes their way, they're launching everything at them. They'll shoot down the missile. They're ready to go to war with them. If North Korea does this, they do that. We're going to blow you out of the water. We're going to, So the Japanese are pretty much saying, we're not going to take any shit from you. Now, that said, this fifth nuclear test, the North Korean nuclear program seems to have a lot of setbacks in it. So when we hear all the fear-mongering around the world of, "Oh my God, North Korea's got an intercontinental missile." Okay, this is like the fifth test that failed. Failed launch. So again, they're not there yet. When it's like, okay, they got 5 perfect launches in a row, then there's cause for concern. But at that, but you still can't underestimate it either. I mean, for those that, North Korea is nothing. An intercontinental ballistic missile is a threat, no matter how you look at it. But it just shows what's going on there. But that's not where the really scary stuff is coming from. North Korea, again, I think is more the useful idiot to China. Really, North Korea, they can't really go rogue on China and do their own thing. They can't. Because if they did, China would just tell the United States, go ahead and have a field day with them. And they could run over top. The only thing that keeps North Korea around is the fact that China backs North Korea. And Russia to a point. Remember, North Korea is a sought-after target for the United States. Because the fact that it borders Russia and China. And because of that, you could put missile systems that would completely engulf Russia and China with missile systems, U.S. missile systems. Now, of course, everybody's missile-palooza. It's been missile-palooza this year's. The amount of missiles moving around, that's all that's moving around, it seems. Well, not all, but it's like just every other day there's missiles here, missiles there. The over there in Georgia. Was it Georgia? Sorry, Romania. I keep saying Georgia, but Romania. Correct if I said that in a previous WW3 update. But Romania, they're putting on an older version of the Patriot missile system, the PAC-2 missiles. So these, like the most modern U.S. missiles, aren't really that effective against shooting down things. In controlled tests, yeah, they show that they can shoot down some things, but they're really not that reliable. Same thing with Iron Dome. It's really not that reliable. So it's kind of funny that there's so much provoking from the United States surrounding Russia and China with these missile systems that may or may not work very well. And the Russians and Chinese seems to have better countermeasures for these missiles anyway, because they have missiles of their own. The big threat that's NATO's worried about is the Iskander missile systems that are kind of, anytime a Patriot missile system goes up, an Iskander rolls into place. And the difference between the Patriot missile system and the Iskanders is the Iskanders are very, very mobile. It's a truck with 2 missiles that have about a 500-mile range. So, yeah, so basically, you little bastard. Freaking mosquitoes. That's why I'm not outside right now. They're filming. The mosquitoes are they're bad enough in here, let alone up there. But, yeah, so Romania has all kinds of missiles going in. Russians open up forward radar stations, move Iskanders closer to the border. And the Russians still have their doctrine that they said, if they feel threatened, they reserve the right to preemptively strike these missile systems, which the Russians won't do unless they really are threatened. I still say the only thing that gets a Russian response is an invasion of Russia, and the way the rhetoric is in Washington and the recent rhetoric in the Pentagon talking about doing a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia, just a bad idea. So obviously, not only are tensions between the United States and NATO and Russia since the Cold War, but they're actually probably higher tensions than what they were during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're at that level. A lot of people don't realize that because of the things that the media should be talking about, they're not, and the things that they're talking about are irrelevant or fear-mongering or whatever. So there's that going on, which is kind of, really tense, So to me, I just want to let people know what's going on. Now, we're going to go over to Sweden, friends in Sweden. Sweden is, and I got a fair amount of Swedish subscribers and stuff like that. And they tell me what goes on in Sweden and stuff like that. Sweden is bizarro world to the outside of the rest of the Western world. Here's the thing, okay? You've got Sweden that pretty much has its borders down, letting in migrants, the same as the rest of the European countries. They're over batshit crazy with the political correctness in their government to the point where it's nihilistic to their people. But then they grow a spine for NATO. You know what I mean? Like, okay, they want to be aggressive and join NATO to be aggressive towards, maybe not be aggressive towards Russia, but jump on the bandwagon, which they don't need to join NATO at all. It's just going to cost them money they don't have. It's the same thing here in Canada. We don't need to be a part of NATO. And you could participate in NATO without being a part of it. I mean, Sweden and Norway have been non-NATO members for years, and same with Finland, non-NATO members for years, participating with NATO. What's the difference? Really, what are they going to get extra? We could look at Poland, for example. Yeah, they got a whole bunch of new American F-16s and tanks and stuff like that to upgrade their military. Problem is they can't afford to run the stuff they got, so they had to divert back to the old Soviet stuff that they bought in the first place, MiG-29s, T-72s, and et cetera, et cetera. So they've got all this new stuff, but they just can't afford to use it. So they really didn't gain anything, but now they're like priority number one for Russia to knock off the map if things go awry. So you got all these war drills hosted in Poland. It really, okay, yeah, it makes sense to a point, but on the other hand, it's not the benefit that I think a lot of Eastern European countries think NATO is. Plus, you have to understand that I think the war goal is to have the war in Eastern Europe. That was the whole probably one of the main points of destabilizing the Ukraine, was to get Russia to roll into the Ukraine, to get onto Poland's border, to invoke Article 5. Latvia is the one that NATO